After 3 years, Dennis Rittenmeyer is stepping down as the head of the community organization One Region. He came in as the first executive director of this combined group. He's leaving an organization that has a wide range of goals, from improving healthcare and transportation to improving cooperation among the various cities and towns in the region. Dennis, welcome.
Steve, thank you. Glad to be here.
So, well, before we get into all this, why are you leaving? I mean, you're a guy who has really been involved. You've run the regional bus authority. You're president of Cal College. Why bother to stop now?
Well, I'm not exactly sure I'm stopping. It's just that One Region, which was originally envisioned to be a part-time responsibility, has ballooned into a full-time responsibility. We have a number, as you mentioned, a number of projects underway. Many of them are very exciting: healthcare project, public safety projects. But there's so much, I'm having difficulty keeping up with it, and I sort of never signed on for that much activity. So we're in good shape financially and programmatically, and it seemed like it was a good time to hand it off to somebody else.
I had a conversation last week with somebody who said, well, veterans issues are part of this. I mean, this is a very wide range of ideas that are all, but what have you learned? What have you learned about how the region works? Because you've not only did this for 3 years, you've been involved in a lot of projects.
Well, as we were just speaking off air, what I've learned is no one's in charge. And so with, at least in Lake County alone, 18 governmental units, 18 school corporations, 18 police departments. When you try to do something like, and the best worst example is the consolidation of the emergency 911 system, we still have two holdout communities, and they're headed by independently elected officials, and they can say, no, we don't want to do it.
So what have you learned about how do you bring all those folks together?
Well, I think, first off, it's not easy, and it's not quick. You have to spend a lot of time attempting to build consensus. Hoping that, of course, the idea, the concept, whatever it is you're working on, in this case, emergency 911 services, is fundamentally a good idea. And so the question is working out the details and working with the naysayers who never quite want to get to the point of talking about the idea because they just know they don't want to do it.
They don't know they want to do it. So is the region just simply doomed here? We've got so many entities, we've got so many different communities, we've got a couple of different counties here. There's no one large, overwhelming player. Are we just always going to squabble amongst ourselves?
Well, it's not a very pleasant scenario, and that, of course, has been the history. The reference to balkanization has been around for the 30 years that I've been back in the region, and if not before. But I think, again, it takes hard work, takes some patience, certainly, and occasionally I run out of patience, I'll confess. But to continue to search for the good ideas that will help improve the quality of life for all of our citizens. And the One Region agenda list, if you will, is pretty exciting with some things that we're working on. I think they hold the promise of improving the quality of life for our citizens.
Describe a little bit about what One Region is. How does this work, and how do all these ideas end up in all this one pot?
Well, One Region is still very much a work in progress. When I give the typical Chamber of Commerce, Rotary Club speech, I always put that in there. The fact is, as you mentioned, we're 3 years old. We're a resulting organization from the merger of the former Quality of Life Council, which was nearly 20 years old, but had fallen on hard times, and the initiatives undertaken by the Times Media Company of One Region, One Vision. And the year I was on leave from Calumet College, before I actually retired, is when the organizers, a group came together, led by Mark Heckler at Valparaiso University, Mark Mazel, then of the Forum, to try to craft this new entity. And they did that, finished that work in May of 2012, offered me the opportunity to become the first executive director. But here's the most important thing. In 3 years, less than 3 years, we're not quite 3 years old, we've had 2 retreats. I have 2 relatively new board co-chairpersons. One always comes from the Times and one always comes from higher education. Okay. That's what the bylaws say. And a half a dozen new board members. And so as we find our way with some new people with new ideas, it hasn't exactly been a straight road. So the things we're working on today are not exactly the things that I inherited 3 years ago.
So it's changed a great deal. So people just don't agree? Can you sense that disagreement early on?
No, I don't think in the case of what's caused us to have these retreats and talk about our future is because people disagree. It's what's the best way to have an impact? What's the best way to make change? And originally, as you alluded a minute ago, I inherited 17 different projects, and I was overwhelmed. Well, it turned out there wasn't very much substance behind some of those projects, and now we've honed it down to 4.
Okay. So you have, but when it comes to some of these big things, like, and I find that one of the most frustrating things when I have people on the air is nobody disagrees that we need better health care in Northwest Indiana. Nobody disagrees that we need better public transportation. But yet, even though you see so many people that seem eager to delve into these issues and they seem eager to be involved, that in the end, nobody seems to agree on a solution.
Well, I don't know. I'd quarrel with you a little bit about whether people agree we need improved public transportation. There are plenty of people who say, no, we don't need it. I won't ride it. I'm not going to pay for it. In the case of the 9/11, 911 consolidation, that was a state law that we were supposed to conform to, like the other 91 counties in the state, by December 31st. Well, we failed that deadline. There's another one coming up. But we're still squabbling. We still have 2 communities that don't want to join. So I don't mean to say that everybody agrees on the concept and then we just have to work out the details. Sometimes it's that easy. Other times not so much. The 2 examples I just mentioned. We're
Right.
worse off in the category of public transportation. We are worse off today than we were when I started as president of the Regional Transportation Board 15 years ago.
That has to be frustrating. So what's the solution? After all this and after all you've learned, and what's the solution here?
Well, I think the solution is continuing to call people together, interested parties. Don't be exclusive, be inclusive, so that everyone that wants to has an opportunity to get their views on the table. But that's where we begin to have difficulty because I'll make up some numbers, but let's say we have a conversation about some initiative and 75% of the people want to do it one way and 25% of the people want to do it the other way. The way we operate in Northwest Indiana, everyone has veto power. Right. Every elected official can say, no, I'm not going to do it.
Oh, so how do you stop that?
Well,
or can you stop that?
Actually, Indiana has quite a fine example in a sense with the city-county arrangement, Unigov, as it is known, in Indianapolis. And you may have seen that Chris White just a couple of weeks ago wrote an editorial about the city of Lake, that if we could pull our communities together into a single city, we would be a very powerful force.
You really think that's possible, that we could do something like Indianapolis, where they essentially combine their county with their city?
Well, and it's
because
important.
Indianapolis, you have one big city. Here, you have several large cities.
But it is important to note, most people do not know this, they are still working on that. There is still not a consolidated fire department, one. Right. They've done some consolidation, but not all of it.
But they're certainly farther along than Northwest Indiana. And could
yes.
that model actually work here?
Well, they had a Dick Lugar, who went on to great notoriety, obviously.
Sure.
But they had a Dick Lugar who was a master at this kind of work and later exercised great leadership in international affairs.
Bosnia was nothing compared to Indiana politics, is what you're saying.
You could make that argument. But we are balkanized. Indianapolis, even then, was the flagship community, and right now we don't have a flagship community. Gary and Hammond are almost equal population. Gary has dropped enough that Hammond now exceeds Gary.
Right.
East Chicago has lost enough population that it's a distant third, but those 3.
All right. Well, we're not going to solve all this right now, but so what are your plans?
Not by the end of the hour?
No. So what are your plans before I let you go here?
Well, my personal plans?
Mm-hmm.
My personal plans are to leave the executive director position at One Region on or about the end of May. That's what I propose to my directors. That depends in some measure on how quickly they can find an executive director to step in. I'm not trying to leave the organization in a lurch. I gave 2 months, basically 2 months notice. It's unclear, I think, right now whether the process to find a replacement will go fast or slow.
Okay.
But I've been asked, would I be willing, if it goes more slowly, would I be willing to stay on? The answer is yes.
What you're saying is you might be around for a while. Okay. Well,
Oh, I'm not going anywhere.
all right.
I'm just not expecting to be quite as busy and diffused as I have been the last 3 years.
Unfortunately, that's where we're going to have to leave it. Dennis Rittenmeyer, who's at some point going to be leaving as the head of one region. Thank you so much for being on.
Thanks for having me, Steve.